welcome. Today I have a couple of tags I'm going to do, and I kind of gave myself a challenge of using pretty much all the same supplies to make two vastly different looking tags, mainly by color. And so that's what I'm doing today. I'm starting with two tags I cut on my Cricut out of Bristol Smooth paper, and I'm giving them a coat of old paper. And maybe I don't need to do this. Well, I guess I really do, because especially on the pink one, you do see the background, and maybe even just a little bit on the grungy one. But anyway, so I'm doing kind of the same thing on both, but altering the colorway, kind of opposite. And then the ephemera is similar, but it is different. So I don't really care too much about how smooth the bottom layer is, because it's going to be covered up. And so I start by just adding a little bit of line backs, kind of like a grid. This is a grid stamp that I've had for quite a while. I think I got it from Rubberdance. And so I'm just putting some little grid marks here and there. And on the pink one, I used Archival Pebble Beach. And on the grunge one, I used Archival Potting Soil. So that's really the main difference of color that I used. I'm using this new stamp I had from Tim Holtz, Stamper Anonymous. It's from the Faded Type stamp collection. And on one side I'm stamping with Kitsch Flamingo. And you could stamp with Kitsch Flamingo, or you could stamp with an embossing stamp. I have both, but I chose to use the Kitsch Flamingo just for a stronger pink. So I add some Kitsch Flamingo embossing powder on top of the stamp, and then I emboss it. And I can do that because the distressed ink is wet enough. It holds its wetness. So there's some stamps that are going to dry too quickly or stamping ink is going to dry too quickly to do any kind of embossing on it. So now on the other one, I'm going to do some vintage photo, and pretty much the same thing, and just a different color. Now this one's not quite as wet, so I am a little more worried about it catching the embossing powder, the embossing glaze powder, but it really does pretty good. In fact, it sticks to a little more than I really wanted it to, and so I am kind of dusting off a bit of it in some places with a dry paintbrush. I don't really care if it's kind of messy looking, because that's kind of the look I'm going for. And then I also emboss that one. So I'm gonna give them both some distress ink on top of the card. The pink one is going to get some vintage photo, and the brown one is going to be getting some Kitsch Flamingo. So just kind of swapping up the colors from the glaze. So it goes on pretty light. I could add weight and add some more to darken it, but I'm gonna darken it in a different way. And I'm gonna do the same thing for the vintage photo. And because the text has been embossed, you don't have to worry about anything you're adding diluting that color, because it's just sitting on top. And you could leave it sitting on top and it would stay there until it got rubbed off or wet or something. But I usually take a dry baby wipe and wipe it off from any of the embossing. So now for the pink, I'm taking a stencil and then I'm just spraying some picked raspberry. I think that was, or was that kitsch flamingo? I think it's picked raspberry. Actually, no, I think that was kitsch flamingo. And then I'm doing it the others, just flipping it over and getting some of that pink on the brown just to add a little more pink. It was kitsch flamingo, I'm pretty sure. And then I'm adding some of the, I think it's called frosted crystal. Let me look at it. Yes, frosted crystal. It's a Tim Holtz product. It will add kind of an icy look to it. You won't really see it though, but it just adds some shimmer because it gets embossed. It's an embossing powder, so you're embossing it. So it's kind of adding a little bit of texture and a little bit of reflection there. You'll have a little reflection. Now the brown one does not look very good, and I really had doubts for a while about how that brown one was going to turn out. I'm like, I don't know about this brown one. It wasn't looking like I was picturing it in my head, but it ends up being my favorite of the two. And if you have any left that just you either don't want to wait for it to dry, you can just pick it up with a paper towel. And now I'm just going to go and continue on with the grunge one. I'm going to add some walnut stain just to bring the more brown into it. And I'm giving it a spritz and flick, and that's where you just spray some water into your hand and flick it on your card, and that'll just kind of remove a little bit of the ink you've put down so you can see through. But I'm not done yet. I'm still not loving it yet at this point. And so I'm adding some scorched timber. And to me, I think that is when it starts to come alive for me. It starts looking good and I start liking it. Scorched timber is a really dark brown. It's one of my favorites. I use it a lot. And then I'm going to add some around the edges just to darken the edges a bit, coming in a little bit on the tag. And here I'm using a dry baby wipe and just wiping off some of the embossed areas just to remove any of the browns that I've added off the pink. So doesn't that look a lot better? And it even looks better once you put on the embellishments and the ephemera. With the pink one, I'm going to add some vintage photo. I want this one to look a little, I don't want it to look grungy, but I want it to look aged and not new. So I did it around the edges, and then I'm also going to add some splatter. Not a whole lot. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, so the ink's pretty much on it, and I'm gonna do some stamping on the ephemera pieces that I'm gonna add. And I think with only a couple exceptions, these are all digital downloads. If you watch, you've seen the florals, at least the same, I think it's the same Etsy shop does these florals. It did some of the other florals I did. But so I'm just stamping on some of the little pieces I'm adding. And with the pink, for the most part, I'm stamping with potting soil. And for the grungy one, I'm stamping with StazOn black. I'm adding the ephemera, I'm adding some vintage photo around the edges just so there isn't any white edges. And this one has a stem on it, which I will be cutting off because that looks kind of funny, that little stem coming out the edge. This piece here is a number list from Tim Holtz, one of my favorites. I add to almost everything I do. So I did like the idea of some of those leaves just kind of coming off the tag a little bit. Even that top little ticket looking thing, it goes off just a little bit. On the right, I use ephemera that's a little lighter in color, not quite so grunged up. I think one is a dahlia and one is a zinnia, if I recall. Okay, so that's basically how it's going to look. So I'm going to be getting my glue. Oh, well, I was thinking I maybe do some splatter first, but I don't think I am. Oh, I am. I was thinking I did, but I was thinking, well, why would I do that? It's already splattered. But I do splatter with some Distress Spritz. And I'm using picked raspberry and just a little bit. And I'm actually even putting it on the grunge one. So you can kind of see a little glowiness on that. And that's one way you can use the Spritz, is just by taking the nozzle out and kind of splattering it on your tag. You don't always have to spray. Okay, so now I'm getting ready to glue. Putting that one up at the top just because I just thought it looked a little bare up there. I could have added more splatter or a stamp even, but the stamp wouldn't have come clean very well because, or it wouldn't have stamped clean because I have the frosted crystal there. So it was kind of bumpy, so I didn't think I'd be able to stamp there. So I opted just for a little piece of ephemera. That one normally might go the other way, but I kind of liked it this way. If I was using it the opposite way, I probably would have removed the white part of it, maybe cut it out or punched it out so it didn't look weird. And my intention was to just use part of that, and I'll use the other part for something else. And I glued that all down, and I should have left me a little spot to insert my flower. So I'm just taking that little tool and adding a little slot for me to, and it wasn't dry, so that was easy to do. And with the other one, I'm leaving the petals to come off the tag ever so slightly. And now I'm gluing down the other one. And I didn't press the bottom to kind of make it hit because I wanted to slide this number list underneath it, and then I'll re-hit those with glue and make them stick. We're getting close to the end. There's on the pink one, there's just a little bare spot on the piece of ephemera. I added a sticker, but it's just up a little higher, and so I'm just gonna add a little bit of number from eccentric, just kind of fill that in. I'm adding a couple sentiments, and I think this is from Small Talk. And so the pink one's getting a light colored one, which I add some vintage photo. It says be authentic. And the grunge one will get a black one, and it says be original. So the last thing I'm going to do is to give them some ribbon for the top. And I use a seam binding, I think it's rayon. I get it on Amazon. It's just you get a pretty good bunch. I've been using it for quite a while and still have plenty left. So I'm putting down some kitsch flamingo, some picked raspberry, some vintage photo, and then some scorched timber. The brown one, the grunge one, I'm gonna pick up the scorched timber, vintage photo, and a little of the pinks. The pink one, I'm going to pick up the pinks and some vintage photo. I don't want to grab any scorched timber on that one because it'll just be a little too dark. So once I have them down, I'm just adding some water, some spritz of water to get it wet. And I'm putting one kind of over on the left side, one on the right. I am grabbing some of the inks on the left for the grunge one, but I'm not adding any scorched timber on the pink one. And then I just grab my little dryer and dry them, and it dries very quick. Often I do 2 pieces for each one, and I had intended to, but I normally making 1 tag, so I only pulled out 2, so I thought, oh well, they'll just get 1 and they'll be fine. And it's actually fine. So I hoped you've enjoyed my experiment with making 2 tags that were totally different, but using almost the same basic things, at least color-wise and product-wise, other than the ephemera. But I had fun doing it. It was kind of an experiment, and I wasn't sure how that brown one, the grunge one, was going to turn out. Was worried there for a while. But I hope you enjoyed it. I have some final pictures coming up, and I would appreciate it if you give me a thumbs up, if you would subscribe if you haven't. But otherwise, I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks for watching.